Chidi was born into a wealthy family, but his life was far from ordinary. Crippled from the neck down, he was forced to rely on a wheelchair for mobility. Despite his disability, Chidi was still known for his strikingly handsome features and charismatic personality. He was the youngest of 3 sons, but in the eyes of the family, he was nothing more than a burden. His 2 brothers, both able-bodied, were expected to inherit the family's massive fortune. Chidi had long given up on his dreams of inheriting anything, knowing that his family tradition only allowed a male heir to carry on their legacy. Chidi's father, once a proud and prosperous businessman, had become a bitter man over the years, constantly frustrated by the circumstances surrounding his youngest son. Meanwhile, Chidi's mother had passed away when he was still a boy, and his father remarried to a woman who treated him with cold indifference. Chidi lived in a mansion, but often felt more like a prison, especially when he was confronted with his family's disregard for him. As his brothers grew up and married, the wealthy family grew more distant, and Chidi's own place within the family felt less significant with every passing day. Nmasi had always been beautiful. However, her beauty came with its own share of pain. Born into a poor family, Nmasi's life had been a constant struggle. After her mother's death, her father remarried a cruel woman who treated Nmasi like a servant. Forced to cook, clean, and do all the housework, Nmasi's dreams were crushed early on. She was never allowed to attend school, with her stepmother always reminding her that she was worthless and would never amount to anything. Despite this, Nmasi secretly taught herself how to read and write. Her mind was her only escape. Though Nmasi was beautiful, she was also intelligent, qualities her father failed to notice. All he cared about was pleasing his new wife. Nmasi endured the emotional abuse and neglect in silence, holding on to the hope that one day she would escape. But little did she know, her life was about to take a drastic turn. Her stepmother, seeing the young girl as a burden and a potential threat to her own daughter's future, decided that Nmasi should be married off to the first suitor who would take her. And so, Nmasi's fate was sealed, as she was pushed into a marriage she had no choice but to accept. Nmasi had no idea that the man she was being married to was Chidi, a crippled man from a wealthy family. When she was introduced to him, she was told he was a suitable match, as he could not father children and would therefore not be a threat to the family's inheritance. Chidi's family, having no idea of Nmasi's true potential, believed that her uneducated background made her the perfect wife for their disabled son. Her beauty was the only quality they cared about. The mockery behind their backs was unbearable as they laughed at Chidi's disability and questioned how he would ever produce an heir. As Nmasi entered the marriage, her heart was full of uncertainty and fear. She did not know if she could ever love a man who was so physically different from the men she had imagined herself with. But when she saw Chidi for the first time, she was struck by how handsome he was. Even in his wheelchair, his gentle demeanor and calm confidence made her feel a deep sense of empathy. Nmasi had no choice but to follow the path her stepmother had laid out for her, but as she began to learn more about Chidi, she realized that this marriage might not be as suffocating as she had once thought. The wedding took place amidst the skepticism of Chidi's brothers and their wives. They mocked Chidi, questioning how a crippled man like him could ever produce a male heir to inherit the family wealth. They laughed openly at the idea of him fathering a son, calling him a burden to the family legacy. His brothers whispered behind his back, certain that their own children would eventually inherit everything. The mockery cut deep, but Chidi, ever the optimist, chose to ignore the laughter. He believed that love and respect would grow with time. However, the atmosphere in his own home felt like a constant reminder of how the world perceived him. As Chidi and Nmasi settled into their new life together, they were constantly reminded of the disdain that Chidi's family had for their union. Yet, Nmasi couldn't help but feel a strange sense of solidarity with Chidi. She had been treated unfairly her entire life, and now, she could see that he too faced a world that seemed determined to strip him of his worth. Despite the ridicule from his family, Chidi began to show Nmasi the depth of his intelligence, warmth, and grit. She began to see beyond the wheelchair, recognizing that there was so much more to him than anyone had ever realized. Weeks passed, and Nmasi began to feel different. At first, she dismissed the signs of pregnancy, uncertain and scared of what it could mean. But When she went to a local clinic and confirmed her suspicion, everything changed. She was pregnant with Chidi's child, a son. The news sent shockwaves through the family, who had laughed at the idea of Chidi producing an heir. The impossible had happened. The mockery from his brothers quickly turned into jealousy and fear. Nmasi had defied expectations, and now the entire family's future was at risk. The tension grew as both Nmasi and Chidi wondered if the pregnancy could truly be the key to their future success. Chidi was filled with joy at the thought of becoming a father, while Nmasi found herself unsure of her emotions. How would her stepmother react? Would they accept her child? Or would the family continue to fight them at every turn? There were far more obstacles ahead than either of them could foresee. But with the pregnancy came hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, this child could break the chains of tradition and reshape their family's legacy forever. Chidi's brothers were furious when they learned that Nmasi was pregnant with a son. The family's wealth and legacy were now at risk, and they began to plot against the couple. They feared that Nmasi's child would be the heir they never wanted. Chidi's brothers began to manipulate and deceive, using their influence to spread lies about Nmasi and Chidi, hoping to discredit them in the eyes of the family. The situation escalated when Chidi's stepmother secretly began to manipulate events, trying to pressure Nmasi into leaving Chidi and marrying another man. In a moment of quiet vulnerability, Chidi discovered his brother's plot. The reality of the betrayal hit him like a ton of bricks. His family had never believed in him, and now they were willing to go to any lengths to steal away his legacy. The discovery was painful, but it also pushed Chidi and Nmasi closer together. They realized that they could not rely on anyone but each other to protect their future and the legacy of their unborn son. The fight for their family had just begun, and the stakes were higher than they had ever imagined. As Nmasi's pregnancy progressed, she decided it was time to reveal her secret education to Chidi. She had spent years secretly studying in her spare time, teaching herself to read, write, and even learn basic business and legal skills. This was her power, the knowledge she had gained in silence, and now it was time to put to use. She shared her journey with Chidi, explaining how she had always dreamed of escaping the limitations imposed on her by her stepmother and father. With this knowledge, Nmasi believed she could help transform Chidi's business and ensure their family's future. Chidi was both surprised and impressed by Nmasi's determination. He had always thought she was a simple village girl, but now he saw her as a force to be reckoned with. Together, they began to brainstorm ways to protect their child and secure their inheritance. Nmasi knew it wouldn't be easy, but her education gave her the confidence to fight back against the family's corruption. She had a plan, and with Chidi's support, they would finally start a fight for what they rightfully deserved. As Nmasi's pregnancy neared its final trimester, Chidi and Nmasi uncovered an old family that had been hidden for years. It was a document written by Chidi's father before his death, and it stated that the true heir to the family fortune would not only be a son, but also someone who could prove themselves worthy of leadership. The surprise in the will was that it didn't just require a son. It required someone who could show the family a future beyond the traditional values they had always held dear. The will, hid away by his brothers, now gave Chidi a glimmer of hope. However, the joy of discovering this document was short-lived. When Chidi tried to confront his brothers about the will, they denied its existence. They began to make threats, trying to convince Chidi that the only way to preserve peace within the family was for him to step aside and let them inherit the fortune. The family was divided. Chidi wanted to stand up for his rights, while his brothers sought to destroy everything he had built with Nmasi. The battle over the family fortune was escalating, and there was no turning back. Tensions between Chidi and his brothers continued to rise as they began to spread rumors about Nmasi's pregnancy. They accused her of being a schemer, using her beauty and intelligence to manipulate Chidi and take control of the family's wealth. The family's once peaceful home became a place of constant tension and conflict. Chidi's brothers started spreading false information in the community, trying to turn the public against the couple. They painted Nmasi as a gold digger, claiming that she was after the family fortune from the start. Despite the mounting pressure, Nmasi stood firm by Chidi's side. She began to strengthen her alliances with people who believed in their cause, starting to work in secret to disrupt her brother's plans. Nmasi knew that their future was at stake. She couldn't let them take everything they had worked for, especially now that she was carrying the son that would inherit it all. The conflict deepened, and both sides began to prepare for what would be a battle for control. Just when things seemed to be getting better, a devastating betrayal shook Chidi to his core. He learned that one of his closest allies had been working with his brothers all along. The person who had promised to help him take control of his inheritance had been secretly feeding information to his brothers, tipping them off about every move Chidi and Nmasi made. This betrayal came at the worst possible time. Nmasi was due to give birth soon, and the pressure to protect their child was mounting. Heartbroken and disillusioned, Chidi turned to Nmasi, who was equally devastated by the betrayal. The trust they had in their allies had been shattered. But Nmasi, ever resourceful, reminded Chidi that they had each other, and together they could still outsmart those who tried to break them. This renewed determination gave them the strength to fight back, but they knew that the road ahead would be even more dangerous than before. The day finally arrived, and Nmasi gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. The family's joy was palpable, but so was the fear. Chidi's brothers immediately saw the birth of the male heir as a threat to their claim on the fortune. They wasted no time in trying to get legal action against Chidi and Nmasi, accusing them of falsifying documents and claiming the inheritance illegally. The couple, though overjoyed by their son's birth, was now thrust into a legal battle that could tear their family apart. In the face of overwhelming odds, Nmasi kept her cool and used the legal knowledge she had gained over the past months. She knew that this battle wouldn't just be about the fortune. It was about proving their worth and fighting for their future. She began to gather all the necessary evidence to counter her brother's claims. But as the battle loomed, Chidi was pulled into a deeper family conspiracy, one that he never saw coming. As Chidi and Nmasi prepared for the courtroom battle, they uncovered a shocking truth. Their entire family had been involved in a much larger scheme. Chidi's brothers had been manipulating the family fortune for years, using fake documents and hidden accounts to control the wealth. The family's so-called wealth was built on fraud. With this knowledge in hand, Chidi and Nmasi had a powerful weapon they hadn't anticipated. However, revealing this truth would come at a high price. The family would be torn apart, and Chidi would be forced to confront his own father's complicity in the scheme. As the revelations unfolded, Chidi faced a moral dilemma. Exposing corruption meant destroying everything his father had built, but it was the only way to truly claim what was rightfully his. The news of Chidi and Nmasi's legal battle spread across the community like wildfire. Public opinion was divided. Some sympathized with the young couple, believing that they had been wronged by the corrupt family. Others believed that Chidi's brothers should inherit the fortune, as they were seen as the more suitable heirs. The media coverage of the case became sensational, and every move Chidi and Nmasi made was scrutinized. This external pressure added to the couple's stress, but they remained focused on their ultimate goal, to secure their son's future and prove their worth to the world. Chidi's family became more desperate, resorting to dirty tactics to discredit them in public. The battle had become more than just about money. It was about respect, justice, and family. Amidst the chaos, a silent threat emerged. Someone within Chidi's inner circle was working against him. But who? Chidi's trust in his closest allies had been shattered before, and now he had to contend with the possibility of yet another betrayal. As the couple prepared for their court date, they received a mysterious message, warning them that their son's life was in danger. Was it a veiled threat from Chidi's brothers, or was there a deeper conspiracy at play? Nmasi and Chidi were forced to take extreme measures to protect their child. The stakes had never been higher, and they both knew that they couldn't trust anyone but each other. Would they be able to keep their son safe, or would this latest threat derail their entire plan? In a heart-stopping twist, it was revealed that Chidi's father had been behind the entire plot to deny him the inheritance. Chidi had always believed his father was an ally, but in reality, his father had never believed in him. The revelation crushed Chidi, who had hoped for a moment of reconciliation with the man who had always been distant. It became clear that his father's loyalty had always lied with his two other sons. Devastated but determined, Chidi and Nmasi fought back with everything they had. They presented irrefutable evidence in court, proving that the family's wealth had been fraudulently obtained. As the trial reached its climax, the tension was unbearable. Would the truth finally come to light, or would the family's corruption triumph? The courtroom drama reached a fever pitch as Nmasi and Chidi presented their final piece of evidence. The judge, a respected elder, listened intently as Nmasi outlined the intricate web of deceit and fraud woven by Chidi's brothers and father. The evidence was undeniable, and for the first time, the family was forced to confront their lies. But just as it seemed like the tide was turning in their favor, Chidi's brothers made a last-ditch attempt to discredit them, accusing Nmasi of falsifying documents. The accusation was baseless, but the uncertainty it caused rattled the couple. As the judge deliberated, tensions in the courtroom were palpable. Outside, the media coverage intensified. Public opinion began to swing in favor of Chidi and Nmasi, but there was still no guarantee that the court would rule in their favor. The uncertainty of the outcome weighed heavily on them. They were fighting not just for their son's inheritance, but for their dignity, their family's future, and their right to a life they deserved. As the days leading up to the verdict passed, Chidi's brothers, desperate to maintain control, approached Nmasi with an offer. They promised to drop all their claims if she agreed to leave Chidi and take the child with her. They would provide for her and her son, but she had to agree to give up Chidi and forfeit their inheritance. The offer was tempting. No more court battles, no more public humiliation. But Nmasi, whose intelligence and strength had guided her thus far, refused to let go of the man she loved and the life they had started to build. She shared her decision with Chidi, who was filled with both pride and fear. He knew that this was a moment that would define them, but he also knew the cost of refusing the offer. They had no choice but to face the consequences, whatever they might be. The final day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was tense, with both sides prepared for the fight of their lives. The judge's ruling would determine not only who inherited the family wealth, but also the future of Chidi, Nmasi, and their son. As the judge took his seat, the family gathered, and all eyes were on the couple. Chidi's brothers, having lost their earlier attempts to manipulate the court, were growing desperate. The judge asked for final statements, and Nmasi, standing tall beside Chidi, delivered a moving and impassioned plea. She spoke about the true value of family, integrity, and love, about how her marriage to Chidi was not a transaction, but a bond based on respect, not wealth. She pointed out that even though they had been mocked and rejected, they had never stopped loving each other and fighting for what was right. Her speech was heartfelt, and even the judge appeared moved. But just as the case seemed to reach its emotional peak, a final bombshell was dropped. In a shocking twist, a mysterious figure entered the courtroom. Chidi's long-lost uncle, who had been estranged from the family for years. The uncle revealed that he had always known about the family's deceptive practices and had been secretly collecting evidence against Chidi's brothers for years. He had come forward with crucial evidence that would expose the entire family scheme, a set of forged documents that Chidi's brothers had been using to claim the inheritance. This unexpected ally turned the tide in Chidi and Nmasi's favor. With the new evidence in hand, the judge was left with little choice but to rule in favor of Chidi and Nmasi. The victory was sweet, but the emotions were mixed. Chidi's brothers were humiliated, and Chidi's father, once a powerful figure, was left to deal with the consequences of his actions. In the courtroom, Chidi and Nmasi held hands, knowing that the battle had finally been won, but at a cost they could never fully measure. With a ruling in their favor, Chidi and Nmasi finally took control of the family legacy. They were now the rightful heirs of the fortune that had long been denied to them. However, the victory was bittersweet. The loss of family and the betrayals they had endured left scars that would take time to heal. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, they found solace in one another. Nmasi had proven that her intelligence, strength, and determination could overcome any obstacle, and Chidi had shown that despite his disability, he could still shape his destiny. As the story concluded, the couple stood together, united and stronger than ever. They had fought for their future, and now they would build a life free from the shackles of their past. Their son, the true heir, would inherit not just the wealth, but the legacy of resilience and love that had defined their journey.